My sister Chloe watched me sleep in my car and laughed, refusing to open her door. 5 years later, she's begging for $30,000. I replied that I'd help, but she has no idea I've set a legal trap that will cost her everything she has left. This is where the story truly begins, and you won't want to miss what happens. Make sure you're subscribed to see it through to the end. We're always curious. Where in the world are you all watching from today? Let us know in the comments. The notification sound on my phone usually meant money. At 36, I had curated a life where the buzzing of my sleek, platinum-cased smartphone signaled a new contract, a vendor confirmation, or a wire transfer clearing into my business account. As the founder of Ethereal Events, the city's most exclusive planning firm, I was accustomed to the rhythm of high-stakes demands and seven-figure budgets. But tonight, the vibration against the mahogany surface of my desk didn't feel like success. It felt like a warning tremor before an earthquake. I was already in a state of physical vulnerability. A relentless, pounding migraine had besieged me since early afternoon, a jagged spike of pain behind my left eye that made the ambient light of my penthouse apartment feel like shards of glass. I was curled into my leather office chair, pressing a cold compress to my forehead, trying to summon the energy to review the catering manifest for the Senator's Gala next weekend. I was weak, my defenses were down, and the silence of my apartment, usually a sanctuary, felt heavy and oppressive. The phone buzzed again, then a third time. I groaned, peeling the compress from my eyes to squint at the screen. I expected it to be my assistant, Sarah, perhaps panicking about the floral shortage. It wasn't Sarah. The name illuminated on the screen was one I hadn't seen in 5 years. A name I had meticulously scrubbed from my emergency contacts, my social media, and my will. Chloe. My breath hitched in my throat, a physical reaction that had nothing to do with the migraine. The pain behind my eye suddenly seemed insignificant compared to the hollow, cold pit opening in my stomach. Why now? Why tonight? I hesitated, my finger hovering over the glass. Opening that message felt like opening a door I had welded shut for my own survival. But curiosity, that dangerous and ancient instinct, won out. I tapped the icon. The text message was long, too long. It was a wall of gray text that reeked of desperation and calculated humility. Hi, Bethany. I know it's been a long time and I know things were left complicated, but we really need family right now. George and I are in a terrible bind. It's an emergency. We need $30,000 immediately or we're going to lose everything. Please, you're the only one who can help us. Text me back, Chloe. I stared at the numbers. $30,000. To the woman I was 5 years ago, that sum was an impossible fantasy. To the woman I was today, it was the cost of the floral arrangements for a single wedding. It was a wire transfer I could approve with a thumbprint. But the audacity of it stole the air from the room. Complicated, she had called it. She described the systematic destruction of my dignity and the cruelest abandonment of my life as complicated. I set the phone down, my hand trembling slightly, not from fear, but from a sudden, blinding rage that surged through my veins, heating my skin. I stood up, walking to the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city skyline. The rain was beginning to streak against the glass, distorting the lights of the traffic below. It was raining, just like this the last time I saw her. The betrayal hit me all over again, not as a memory, but as a fresh wound. I remembered the sensation of the cold, the hunger, and the absolute shock of realizing that the people who shared your blood could watch you bleed out and simply turn the page. Family, I whispered to the empty room, the word tasting like ash in my mouth. She didn't want a sister. She didn't want reconciliation. She wanted a banker. And she had made the fatal mistake of assuming that the silence of the last 5 years meant I had forgotten. I picked up the phone again. I didn't reply immediately. I let the screen go dark, watching my own reflection in the black glass. I looked different now. Harder, polished, expensive. The betrayal was worse than the diagnosis itself, I murmured, recalling the words my therapist had used years ago. Chloe thought she was texting the desperate, broken girl she had thrown away. She had no idea she was texting a woman who negotiated with sharks for a living, and won. I waited exactly 1 hour before responding. In my line of work, timing is everything. You never answer a desperate vendor immediately, it makes you look eager. You never answer a difficult client immediately, it makes you look available. I applied the same logic to my sister. I showered, washing away the cold sweat of the migraine, dressed in a silk robe, and poured myself a glass of sparkling water. I needed to be sharp. When the clock on my mantle chimed 8, I typed a single, ambiguous sentence. What kind of emergency costs exactly $30,000? I didn't agree, I didn't say no, I just opened the door a crack. The response was instantaneous. The typing bubble appeared, vanished, and appeared again. Then my phone rang. The photo I had for her was old, a picture of us at a barbecue years before the fall. She looked happy. I looked adoring. I let it ring 3 times, controlling my breathing before sliding the bar to answer. Bethany. Her voice was high, tight, and laced with that sugary, frantic energy she always used when she was trying to manipulate our parents. It was a voice I hadn't heard since the day she told me I was ruining her aesthetic by parking my beat-up sedan in her driveway. Hello, Chloe, I said. My voice was calm, devoid of the tremor I felt in my hands. I sat down at my desk, pulling a notepad toward me. I uncapped a gold pen. I was treating this like a business consultation. I got your text. Oh, thank God, she breathed out. I could hear the rustle of movement, the background hum of a television. Bethany, I didn't know if you'd answer. We've missed you so much. The lie was so blatant, so slippery, that I almost laughed. You've missed me. Is that why you blocked my number 5 years ago? That was look, George and I were going through a lot back then, she said quickly, rushing past the accusation. We were stressed. We made mistakes, but we're family, bait, and right now we're terrified. Tell me about the money, Chloe, I cut in. I wasn't going to let her rewrite history tonight. $30,000, that's a specific number. It's the house, she stammered. And Tabitha's tuition. We fell behind, just a little bit. But George's bonus got delayed, and the bank is being unreasonable, and if we don't pay this lump sum by Friday, they're going to start foreclosure proceedings. We can't lose the house, bait. Tabitha is graduating this year. It would destroy her. Tabitha, my niece. I wrote the name down on the notepad, Tabitha. I hadn't seen Tabitha since she was 13. She had been a sweet, quiet girl who loved to draw. Using her as a human shield was a classic Chloe move. Where is George? I asked. He's right here, she said. Put him on. There was a muffled discussion, the sound of a hand over the receiver, and then a heavy sigh. Bethany, George's voice boomed down the line. It hadn't changed. It was still thick with unearned confidence and a subtle undercurrent of aggression. Look, we appreciate you taking the call. It's a bit of a tight spot, just a bridge loan, really. We'll pay you back with interest as soon as the bonus clears next month. A bridge loan, I repeated, testing the phrase. Interesting terminology for a personal handout. It's not a handout, George snapped, his temper flaring instantly. I make good money, it's just a liquidity issue. These banks are predators, you know how it is. I do know how banks work, George, I said softly. I work with them every day. There was a silence on the line. They didn't know what I did. When they kicked me out, I was an unemployed administrative assistant. As far as they knew, I could be working a checkout counter or waiting tables. They had no idea I was sitting in a $3 million penthouse. They were just casting a wide net, hoping I had scraped together some savings or had a credit card they could max out. So, can you do it? Chloe asked, her voice trembling again. Do you have the money? We can sign a promissory note. Anything you want. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the rain. I have the money, I admitted. I heard them both exhale simultaneously. It was the sound of predators scenting blood. "Oh, thank God," Chloe cried. "Bethany, you're saving our lives, you're an angel. I knew you wouldn't turn your back on family." I didn't say yes, I interrupted. The line went dead silent. "I said I have the money, but if I'm going to lend you $30,000, we're going to do this my way. Legally, formally." "Sure, sure, whatever," George said dismissively. "Just write up a paper, I'll sign it." "I'll have my lawyer draft the agreement," I lied. I didn't need a lawyer for what I was planning. I needed my forensic accountant, a man named Marcus who could find a missing penny in a billion-dollar merger. And I'll need to see the foreclosure notice. And the tuition bills, direct from the source. "Why?" George asked, his voice hardening. "Don't you trust us?" "Trust is earned, George," I said, "and you spent yours a long time ago." "Fine," he grunted. "We'll send you the papers. When can we get the check?" "Friday," I said. "Meet me at my office. I'll text you the address." "Your office?" Chloe asked, confused. "Yes, Friday at noon. Do. And be late." I hung up before they could ask any more questions. My heart was pounding, but my mind was crystal clear. They thought they were manipulating a naive little sister. They thought they could bully me, take the cash, and disappear again. But they had forgotten one crucial thing. They had forgotten that I knew exactly who they were. And more importantly, they didn't know that my office wasn't a cubicle. It was a fortress. And the paperwork I was going to have them sign wasn't a loan agreement. It was an authorization for a full financial autopsy. To understand why I was willing to go to such lengths, to understand why I wasn't just writing a check or simply blocking their number, you have to understand the night of the rain. 5 years ago, my life imploded. My husband of 4 years left me for his dental hygienist, cleaning out our joint savings account before he went. 2 days later, the small marketing firm where I worked declared bankruptcy, leaving me with no severance and a final paycheck that bounced. I was 29, heartbroken and destitute. I had packed everything I owned into my 10-year-old Honda Civic. I had $300 to my name. I drove to the only place I thought I would be safe, my sister's house. Chloe and George lived in a sprawling, 4-bedroom colonial in the suburbs. It was a house built for appearances, manicured lawn, dual luxury SUVs in the driveway, and a grand entrance that screamed upper middle class. I arrived at 9:00 p.m. It was pouring rain, a freezing November downpour. I stood on their porch, shivering, my clothes soaked through, knocking on the door. When Chloe opened it, she didn't hug me. She blocked the doorway with her body. "Bethany?" she asked, frowning. She was wearing a cream-colored cashmere sweater and holding a glass of red wine. The warmth from the hallway spilled out, smelling of roasted garlic and rosemary. "What are you doing here?" I have nowhere to go, Chloe," I stammered, my teeth chattering. "David took everything. I lost my job. I just need a place to crash for a few weeks, just until I get back on my feet. I can sleep on the couch. I can babysit Tabitha, please." George appeared behind her. He was chewing on a piece of steak. He looked me up and down, his eyes landing on my wet hair and my muddy shoes. "We're not running a shelter, Bethany," he said, his mouth half full. "George, please," I begged. "It's freezing. I'm sleeping in my car." "That's not really our problem, is it?" George laughed, a short, barking sound. "Maybe if you hadn't married that loser, you wouldn't be in this mess. We can't have you crashing here. It disrupts the household. We have guests coming this weekend." "I'll stay in the basement," I pleaded. "I won't make a sound." Chloe looked at George, then back at me. I saw a flicker of hesitation in her eyes, but it was quickly extinguished by her desire to please him. "George is right, Bate," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper, as if she were the victim. "It's just not a good time for us. You're a lot of drama right now. We can't have that negative energy around Tabitha." "I'm your sister," I whispered. "You're a mess," George corrected. "Go find a shelter, there's one downtown." He stepped forward and began to close the door. "Wait," I cried, reaching out. "Goodbye, Bethany," Chloe said. She didn't look sad. She looked annoyed. The door clicked shut. I heard the deadbolt slide home. I stood there for 10 minutes, knocking softly, waiting for them to change their minds. I heard the TV turn back on. I heard them laughing about something on the screen. I slept in my car in a Walmart parking lot that night. And the next night. And for 3 weeks after that, until I landed a job catering events and saved enough for a room in a shared apartment. That night forged me. The fire of my ambition was lit by the spark of their cruelty. I worked 18-hour days. I networked. I built ethereal events from nothing but grit and a refusal to ever be cold again. Now, looking at the notepad on my desk, I thought about George. George, who claimed to be a wealth management consultant. A man who wore flashy watches and leased expensive cars, but never seemed to have a distinct office. He was a man who spoke in buzzwords and looked down on anyone who actually worked for a living. If they needed $30,000 urgently, it wasn't because of a delayed bonus. People like George didn't have liquidity issues unless they were living a lie. The tuition story was a hook to catch my sympathy. The foreclosure was the pressure tactic. But there was something else. George's aggression on the phone, Chloe's frantic tone. They weren't just broke, they were scared. I picked up my phone and dialed a number. "Marcus," I said when the line connected. "It's Bethany. I have a job for you. It's personal and I need it fast." "Name?" Marcus asked. He didn't waste time with pleasantries. "George." "And Chloe Miller. I need a full background check. Credit scores, liens, judgments, gambling debts, everything." "I'll have it by tomorrow morning," Marcus said. "And Marcus," I added, "dig deep. I have a feeling my brother-in-law has been managing more than just wealth." I hung up. The stage was set. They wanted a sister to save them. Fine, I would save them. But first, I was going to expose every rotten beam in the house of cards they had built their lives upon. The next morning, the city was washed clean by the storm, leaving the sky a piercing, innocent blue. It was a deceptive calm. Inside my penthouse, the atmosphere was thick with the tension of impending war. I didn't go into the office immediately. Instead, I set up a command center at my dining table. My laptop was open, a pot of strong black coffee sat within reach, and my phone was on speaker as I waited for Marcus to call. Marcus wasn't just an accountant. He was a forensic auditor who had spent 10 years working with the IRS before going private. He had the kind of mind that saw narratives in numbers. He could look at a spreadsheet and tell you if a man was having an affair, an addiction, or a breakdown. When his name flashed on the screen at 10:00 a.m. sharp, I answered immediately. "Tell me," I said, skipping the greeting. "Good morning to you too, Bethany." Marcus's voice was dry, gravelly, and serious. "I hope you're sitting down, because this is a mess. A spectacular, chaotic, flaming mess." "I expected a mess," I said, sipping my coffee. "George has always lived beyond his means." "This isn't just living beyond means," Marcus corrected. "This is criminal negligence bordering on fraud. Let's start with the basics. You asked about the $30,000. Specifically, why they need that exact amount." "Right, the bridge loan for the house and tuition." "That's a lie," Marcus said flatly. "I ran a check on their property records. They aren't in foreclosure. They're underwater on the mortgage, sure, but the bank isn't seizing the house. Not yet. And as for the tuition, I made a few calls. Your niece's school tuition is paid up for the semester. It was paid 3 months ago." My grip on the coffee mug tightened. "So where is the fire? Why the panic?" "The fire," Marcus said, the sound of paper shuffling in the background, "is in Las Vegas and Atlantic City, and an offshore sports betting site hosted in Curacao." I closed my eyes. "Gambling." "Aggressive, high-stakes gambling," Marcus confirmed. "George has racked up debt with some private lenders, not banks, sharks. The kind of people who don't send letters, they send guys with baseball bats. He owes exactly $28,000 to a consultancy firm based in Nevada that has been flagged multiple times for usury. The other $2,000? Probably vig." So he needs my money to pay off a bookie, I said, my voice cold. It gets worse, Bethany. How can it get worse? I looked into his wealth management business. It's a shell. He hasn't had a registered client in 2 years. He's been moving money around to make it look like income, churning credit cards, taking out personal loans, paying one card with another. It's a classic kiting scheme. But here is the kicker. I found a recent credit inquiry for a high-limit American Express card. So, the inquiry wasn't in George's name, or Chloe S. Who was it? Tabitha Miller. The air left my lungs. She's 18, she just turned 18. Exactly, Marcus said. Fresh credit history, pristine score. He's trying to open lines of credit in his daughter's name. I can't confirm if he's succeeded yet without a subpoena or a signed authorization, but the inquiry is there. Bethany, he is cannibalizing his own family to keep the lights on. I stared at the view of the city, my blood running cold. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was about survival. George wasn't just a jerk, he was a parasite. He was going to destroy Tabitha's future before it even began. He was going to saddle her with bankruptcy before she even graduated high school. I need to stop him, I whispered. You can't stop him legally unless you have standing, Marcus warned. You're just the sister-in-law. That's why I have a plan, I said, my mind racing, the pieces clicking into place. Marcus, I need you to draft a document. I don't want a standard promissory note. I want a financial restructuring agreement. Elaborate. I'm going to lend them the money, I said, my voice hardening into steel. But the terms are going to be specific. In exchange for the zero-interest loan, the borrower, George and Chloe, must agree to a full third-party audit of their household finances to ensure repayment capability. They have to grant me, as the lender, full access to view all banking, credit, and investment accounts for the duration of the loan. Marcus whistled low. You're asking them to sign away their privacy. They'll never sign that. They W. Ill, I said, thinking of the desperation in Chloe's voice. Because they think I'm stupid. They think I'm the little sister who slept in a car. They think they can sign the paper, take the check, and then ghost me like they did 5 years ago. They don't think I'll actually enforce the audit. And when you do enforce it, Marcus asked, what's the end game? The end game is Tabitha, I said. I'm going to get proof of the identity theft, and then I'm going to give Chloe a choice, leave him or go down with him. I'll have the contract ready by noon, Marcus said. Bethany, careful. A drowning man will pull anyone down with him. I know, I said, but I learned how to swim a long time ago. Friday arrived with a gray, overcast sky, matching the grim determination I felt in my bones. I arrived at ethereal events at 7:00 a.m. to prepare the stage. My office was located in the Arts District, occupying the top floor of a renovated industrial warehouse. It was designed to intimidate and impress. The elevator opened directly into a reception area of polished concrete, minimalist Italian furniture, and floor-to-ceiling glass walls. I instructed my receptionist, Claire, on exactly how to handle them. They are to wait for 15 minutes, offer them water, nothing else, be polite but distant. At 11:55 a.m., Claire buzzed me. Mr. and Mrs. Miller are here. Let them wait, I said, not looking up from my paperwork. I watched them on the security feed on my monitor. They looked out of place. Chloe was wearing a designer dress that was a season or two old, clutching a counterfeit handbag I spotted immediately. She looked tired, the lines around her eyes deep and etched with anxiety. George was pacing, checking his watch, adjusting his suit jacket. He looked bloated, his face ruddy with high blood pressure and stress. He kept glancing around the office, sneering at the modern art, likely calculating the cost of the furniture. At 12:15 p.m., I finally pressed the button. Send them in. When the heavy glass doors to my private office swung open, I didn't stand up. I remained seated behind my massive, black oak desk, framed by the city skyline behind me. Bethany, Chloe exclaimed, rushing forward with her arms open, aiming for a hug. Sit down, Chloe, I said. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't smile. I simply pointed to the two low-slung leather chairs opposite my desk. Chloe froze, her arms dropping to her sides. She looked at George, confused. George's jaw tightened. He didn't like being ordered around. "Nice place," George grunted, throwing himself into the chair. He crossed his legs, trying to appear casual, but his foot was tapping a frantic rhythm against the floor. "Event planning pays this well, huh? Who knew parties were such a goldmine?" "Competence is a goldmine, George," I replied smoothly. "Parties are just the medium." I picked up a file folder from my desk and opened it. Inside lay the check for $30,000. I saw their eyes lock onto it. Hunger. Pure, unadulterated hunger. "So," I began, clasping my hands, "you need $30,000 to save the house and pay for Tabitha's tuition." "Right," George said, clearing his throat. "Like I said on the phone, temporary cash flow issue. The bonus is tied up in compliance. Bureaucracy, you know." "I do know," I said. "Compliance is very strict these days, especially regarding asset verification." I picked up the check, holding it between two fingers. "I have the funds prepared. However, my accountant advised me that for a personal loan of this size, we need to formalize the arrangement. For tax purposes, of course." I slid the document Marcus had drafted across the desk. It was thick, bound in a blue cover. "What's this?" George asked, looking at it with suspicion. "Standard loan agreement," I lied effortlessly. "It outlines the repayment schedule, 0 interest, as promised, and includes a solvency clause. Since you're using this for household emergencies, it simply grants my auditor the right to verify that the funds are used for the stated purpose, just to make sure the IRS doesn't view this as a gift." George picked up the pen, then hesitated. He flipped through the pages. "Audit rights? Full access to financial records? Bethany, this is a bit much. We're family. You don't need to look at our bank statements." "If you have nothing to hide, George, it's just a formality," I said, leaning forward. My eyes bored into his. "Unless there's something in your financials you don't want me to see." "Of course not," Chloe interjected quickly, terrified the money was slipping away. "George, just sign it. It's just for her accountant, it's fine." George looked at the check in my hand. Then he looked at the contract. I could see the wheels turning. He was thinking, I'll sign it, take the money, and then stall her. She'll never actually check. "Fine," George spat. "If you want to play banker, we'll play banker." He scribbled his signature. Aggressively. He pushed the paper toward Chloe. She signed it without even reading it. I took the document back, checking the signatures. Perfect. I slid the check across the desk. George snatched it up faster than a starving dog. He looked at the amount, and for a second, the tension in his shoulders dropped. He had his lifeline. "Thanks, Bate," Chloe said, wiping a tear from her eye. "Really, you don't know what this means to us." "I think I do," I said quietly. I waited a beat. "I hope this clears up the issue with the consultancy firm in Nevada, George." George froze. He was halfway out of the chair, but he stopped as if he'd been shot. He turned slowly to look at me. His face went from ruddy to pale in a heartbeat. "What did you say?" he whispered. "The consultancy firm," I repeated, my voice pleasant and conversational. "The one you owe 28 grand to. I assumed that's what the tuition story was for. I just hope those guys are understanding about late payments." I don't know what you're talking about," George stammered, glancing at Chloe. Chloe looked between us, confusion clouding her face. "Nevada? George, what is she talking about?" "Nothing," George snapped, his voice cracking. "She's crazy. She's trying to start trouble. Come on, Chloe, we have the money, let's go." He grabbed Chloe's arm, pulling her up. "It's a small world, George," I called out as they retreated toward the door. "Make sure you deposit that before 2:00 p.m. And George." He stopped at the door, his hand on the glass handle, not turning around. "Don't spend it all on the next hand," I said. He ripped the door open and dragged my sister out. I watched them leave on the monitor. My heart was hammering against my ribs, but not from fear, from adrenaline. The trap was set. They had signed the authorization. Now, I didn't need to guess. I had the legal right to tear their life apart to find the truth. The moment they left the building, I scanned the contract and emailed the PDF to Marcus. "They signed," I wrote, "Execute Order 66. It was a joke we shared, but the reality was grim. With their signatures on that document, Marcus could now legally access their credit reports and bank statements through the authorization clause. We didn't have to rely on public records anymore. We could see the transaction history. The weekend passed in a blur of silence. I knew George would deposit the check immediately. I monitored my account and saw the $30,000 vanish on Friday afternoon. On Monday morning, Marcus came to my office in person. He wasn't carrying a single folder this time. He was carrying a box. He set it down on my desk with a heavy thud. "You were right," Marcus said, sitting down heavily. He looked exhausted. "But you were also wrong. It's not just gambling." "Tell me," I said. "George did send $28,000 to the outfit in Vegas," Marcus said. "That stopped the immediate threat. But while I was digging through the joint accounts, I found the transfers. Bethany, he's been draining Chloe's retirement account. It's gone. He forged her signature on a withdrawal request 6 months ago." I felt sick. She doesn't know. There's no way she knows. The statements are going to a P.O. box only George has the key to. But that's not the worst part. Marcus pulled a stack of papers from the box. I pulled the credit file for Tabitha Miller. I held my breath. "He maxed it out," Marcus said softly. "The card he applied for, approved, $10,000 limit. He spent it all in 3 weeks. Online poker, cash advances, and this." He slid a printout across the desk. It was a credit card statement in Tabitha's name. Highlighted in yellow were charges for a luxury apartment rental in the city, jewelry stores, and high-end lingerie boutiques. "He has a mistress?" I asked, looking at the charges. "Looks like it," Marcus said. "He's funding a double life with his daughter's credit score." I stood up, the rage so hot it felt like I was burning from the inside out. He wasn't just a failure. He was a monster. He was stealing his wife's future and his daughter's identity to pay for a girlfriend and a gambling addiction. "I need to see Chloe," I said, "alone." "She won't believe you," Marcus warned. "She's been conditioned to believe him for 20 years. If you just tell her, she'll run back to him and he'll spin it." "I'm not going to tell her," I said, grabbing the stack of papers. "I'm going to show her." I picked up my phone and called Chloe. She answered on the second ring, sounding breathless. "Bethany, thank you again, really, wait." "Chloe, stop," I cut her off. My voice was gentle but firm. "I need you to meet me, right now." I can't. George and I are going to look at cars." "Do not go anywhere with George," I commanded. "Chloe, listen to me. This is about Tabitha." The mention of her daughter stopped her cold. "Is she okay? Did something happen?" "She's in danger, Chloe." "Financial danger. I found something in the audit. I can't explain it over the phone. You need to come to my apartment. Alone? Do not tell George you are coming. If you tell him, you can't help her." "Bethany, you're scaring me." "You should be scared," I said. "I'll see you in 20 minutes." When Chloe arrived at my penthouse, she looked small. The grandeur of my home seemed to shrink her. She sat on the edge of my white sofa, clutching her purse, her eyes darting around nervously. "Where is George?" I asked. "He's at the gym," she lied. I knew she was lying. George hadn't seen the inside of a gym in a decade. "Chloe," I said, sitting on the coffee table directly in front of her, so I was looking up into her face. "I need you to look at something, and I need you to promise me you won't scream." I laid the papers out. First, the withdrawal from her retirement fund. "This shows your 401k balance is 0, I said. Chloe frowned, squinting at the paper. "That's impossible. I have over 100,000 in there. We're saving it for later." "Look at the signature, Chloe. It's dated 6 months ago." She traced the signature with a shaking finger. That looks like my signature, but I didn't sign this." I know, I said. George did. No, she shook her head, a nervous laugh bubbling up. No, George wouldn't. He handles the finances, sure, but he wouldn't touch my retirement. There must be a mistake. Here is the second mistake, I said, laying down the credit card statement. This is an Amex Platinum card. We don't have an Amex, she said. Tabitha does, I said. Chloe froze. Tabitha is 18. She works at a coffee shop. She can't get a platinum card. She can if her father uses her social security number to apply for it. I pointed to the charges. The jewel box, lace and silk, the Grand Hotel. Chloe, is Tabitha buying diamond earrings and staying in 5-star hotels? Chloe's face went gray. She stared at the charges. The denial was warring with the reality right in front of her eyes. She started to hyperventilate. He told me he was investing, she whispered, tears spilling over. He said the money was tight because he was moving assets. He said he was building an empire for us. He built a cage, Chloe, I said. He stole your retirement. He stole Tabitha's credit, and he's spending it on gambling and… I tapped the jewelry charge. Someone else. Chloe let out a sound that wasn't quite a sob. It was a wail of pure, agonizing heartbreak. She covered her face with her hands, rocking back and forth. He's going to jail, she sobbed. Oh my God, he's going to jail. Only if we turn him in, I said. We have to, she cried, looking up, her eyes wild. He stole from Tabitha, he ruined her. Wait, I said, grabbing her hands. If we go to the police now, he'll claim it was a misunderstanding. He'll claim you authorized it. He's manipulative, Chloe. He'll talk his way out of it. Then what do we do? She begged, clutching my hands so hard it hurt. Bethany, help us, please. I'm sorry for everything. I'm sorry for the car. I'm sorry for the rain. Just help me save my daughter. I looked at my sister, broken, terrified, and finally awake. We're going to give him a retirement party, I said coldly. What? Tabitha's graduation party is this Saturday, isn't it? I asked. The one you couldn't afford. Yes. I'm going to pay for it, I said. We're going to host it, a big, beautiful party, all our family, all his business associates, everyone he tries to impress. Why? Chloe asked, trembling. Because, I said, a dark smile touching my lips. George loves an audience, and I think it's time everyone saw exactly what kind of man he really is. Saturday arrived wrapped in the humidity of early summer, the air thick and heavy, as if the atmosphere itself was holding its breath. I had arranged for the graduation party to be held at the conservatory, one of the venues my firm managed exclusively. It was a glass-walled atrium filled with exotic orchids and trailing ivy, a space that usually cost $20,000 just to unlock the doors. I had called in every favor I had, caterers, florists, lighting technicians, to transform it into a dreamscape of gold and ivory. To George, this was a gesture of submission. He believed I was throwing this party to curry favor with him, to apologize for the misunderstanding at my office. To everyone else, it looked like a loving aunt spoiling her niece. But to me, it was a courtroom. Guests began arriving at 6:00 p.m. I stood near the entrance, dressed in a sharp charcoal jumpsuit that felt like armor. I watched George holding court near the open bar. He was wearing a new suit, doubtless purchased with the money I had lent them, and he was laughing loudly, clapping men on the back, playing the role of the benevolent patriarch. Great turnout, Bate, George said, sauntering over to me wit. A whiskey in his hand, his face was flushed with triumph. You really outdid yourself. This place? Top-notch. Maybe you do know what you're doing. I aim for perfection, George, I said, my voice steady. Enjoy the night. It's a once-in-a-lifetime event. Damn straight, he grilled, taking a swig. My little girl is growing up, going to a state school thanks to your help, but hey, it's a start. I'm proud of her. He didn't look at Tabitha once. Tabitha was standing in the corner with her friends, looking overwhelmed and slightly anxious. Chloe was beside her, pale as a sheet, her hands trembling as she adjusted Tabitha's sash. Chloe and I locked eyes across the room. I gave a barely perceptible nod. She swallowed hard and nodded back. She was ready. At 7:30 p.m., the lights dimmed. The chatter in the room died down as the spotlight hit the small stage at the front of the atrium. "Ladies and gentlemen," I spoke into the microphone, my voice echoing clearly through the silence. "If I could have everyone's attention, we are here to celebrate Tabitha, but before we cut the cake, George wanted to say a few words about family." This was the bait. George loved a microphone. He bounded up the stairs, taking the mic from me with a wink. "Thanks, Bethany. You know they say it takes a village, but really, it takes a leader." He chuckled at his own joke. "I've worked hard to give my girls this life. It hasn't always been easy. The markets are tough, but a man does what he has to do to protect his assets, to protect his legacy." He was rambling, drunk on attention and expensive scotch. "Tabitha, honey, this is for you. Your dad always finds a way, remember that." "Actually, George," I interrupted, stepping back into the spotlight. I didn't take the mic back. I just spoke loud enough for the front row to hear and signaled the sound technician. "We have a special presentation for you, a retrospective of your contributions." "Oh, a slideshow," George grinned, loosening his tie. "I love it. Let's see those baby pictures." The massive projection screen behind us flickered to life. But it wasn't a baby picture. It was a PDF document blown up to 10 feet tall. The header read, "Forensic Accounting Report, George Miller." The room went deadly silent, the kind of silence where you can hear ice melting in a glass. George turned around, squinting at the screen. What is this?" "That," I said, my voice projecting clearly as the slide changed, "is a record of the $28,000 you wired to a known illegal gambling syndicate in Nevada last week." A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. George's face went from flush to chalk white. "Bethany, turn this off," he hissed, lunging for me. Two of the security guards I had hired, large, silent men in black suits, stepped out of the shadows and blocked his path. George stumbled back, looking around wildly. "This is a joke," he stammered to the crowd. She's trying to embarrass me. It's a prank." "Slide 3, please," I commanded. The screen changed again. This time, it was the credit card statement. Amex Platinum TABITHA Miller. "And this," I continued, looking directly at Tabitha, who was staring at the screen with her hand over her mouth, "is the credit card George took out in his 18-year-old daughter's name. He maxed it out in 3 weeks." "No," George screamed. "That's a lie, she spent it. She's a spender just like her mother." "The charges include a suite at the Grand Hotel," I read from the screen, "and a diamond bracelet from the jewel box. Tabitha, did you stay at the Grand Hotel last Tuesday?" "No," Tabitha whispered, her voice shaking. Then she yelled it. "No, I was studying for finals." "George," I said, turning to him, "who is Candy? Because that's who signed for the room service." The crowd was murmuring now, a low roar of shock and judgment. George's business partners were backing away. His friends were looking at their shoes. He was stripped naked in front of the very people he had spent his life trying to impress. "You witch," George snarled, his eyes bulging. "You set me up. I'll sue you. I'll ruin you." "You can't sue me, George," I said calmly, "because you signed the authorization. You gave me permission to look, and frankly, I'm not the one you need to worry about." I looked at Chloe. She stepped out of the crowd. She looked terrified, but she walked with a purpose I hadn't seen in years. She walked up the stairs to the stage. "Chloe, tell them," George pleaded, reaching for her. "Tell them your sister is crazy." Chloe slapped him. It was a sharp, cracking sound that echoed through the atrium. "You stole from our daughter," Chloe said, her voice trembling with rage. "You stole my retirement. You lied to me every single day for 20 years. Baby, I can explain." "Don't you dare call me that," she spat. "I'm done, George. The house goes on the market Monday. I'm filing for divorce. Tuesday and tonight." She pointed to the back of the room. The heavy glass doors opened, and 2 uniformed police officers walked in. Marcus walked between them, holding a thick file of evidence. "Tonight," Chloe said, "you're leaving." "Mr. Miller," the officer said, stepping up to the stage. "We have a warrant for your arrest regarding identity theft and wire fraud. Please turn around and place your hands behind your back." George looked at the cops. He looked at the crowd. He looked at me. "You," he whispered, staring at me with pure hatred. "You were nothing. You were homeless." "I was," I agreed, watching the officer click the handcuffs onto his wrists. "And you laughed. Who's laughing now, George?" They marched him out through the center aisle. He didn't go quietly. He was shouting threats, blaming everyone but himself, dragging his feet. But as the doors closed behind him, the silence returned to the room. It lasted for 5 seconds. Then, Tabitha ran to her mother, and they collapsed into each other's arms, sobbing. I stood on the stage, alone in the spotlight, watching them. My heart was pounding, but my hands were steady. The debt was paid. The fallout was swift, brutal, and absolute. Because the arrest happened in front of half the town, there was no way for George to spin the narrative. His reputation didn't just crumble, it evaporated. Within 48 hours, the firm he claimed to work for distanced themselves, revealing he had been let go years ago and had been freelancing without a license. The legal proceedings were messy, but with Marcus's meticulous evidence, they were short. George took a plea deal to avoid a 10-year sentence. He pleaded guilty to 3 counts of identity theft and 1 count of wire fraud. He was sentenced to 36 months in a state penitentiary, followed by 5 years of probation and mandatory restitution. But restitution from a man with nothing is just a word on paper. The real work began with the cleanup. 2 weeks after the party, on a bright, sunny Tuesday, I sat in the living room of my penthouse with Chloe and Tabitha. The atmosphere was different now. The tension was gone, replaced by a fragile, exhausted peace. "Marcus fixed the credit report," I told Tabitha, handing her a letter from the credit bureau. "The fraud alert removed all of George's charges. Your score is back to normal. You can apply for your student loans next year without a cosigner." Tabitha took the paper, tears welling up in her eyes. "Aunt Bethany, I don't know how to thank you. I thought my life was over before it started." "You have nothing to thank me for," I said, reaching over to squeeze her hand. "You're smart, Tabitha. You're going to be a graphic designer. Just promise me one thing, never let anyone else control your name. Not a husband, not a father, nobody." "I promise," she whispered. Chloe was quiet, staring into her coffee cup. She looked tired, but she also looked younger. The weight of the secrets she had been carrying for George was gone. "I sold the house," Chloe said softly. "The market is hot. Even after paying off the mortgage and the debts George hid, there's a little bit left, enough for a small apartment. A fresh start." "That's good, Chloe," I said. "You need a space that's yours." She looked up at me then, and I saw the guilt swimming in her eyes. It was the conversation we had been avoiding. "Bethany," she started, her voice cracking. "That night, 5 years ago, the rain." I stiffened slightly. "You don't have to." "I do," she interrupted. "I watched you walk to your car. I watched you drive away. And I let him tell me it was the right thing to do. I let him convince me that you were the problem. I was so afraid of him, even then. I was so afraid of losing the perfect life he built that I sacrificed my own sister to keep it." She reached across the table, her hand hovering over mine. "I am so sorry," she wept. "I don't deserve your help. I don't deserve you." I looked at her. I saw the sister I used to play with in the backyard. I saw the woman who had been gaslit and manipulated for 2 decades. And I realized that my anger, the fuel that had driven me for 5 years, had finally burned itself out. I didn't need the anger anymore. I had the victory. I took her hand. "You're right," I said softly. "What you did was unforgivable, and it's going to take a long time for me to trust you again completely." Chloe nodded, tears streaming down her face. "But," I continued, "you're my sister, and you're free now. We can build something new, not the way it was before, something better, real." I stood up and walked to the kitchen counter, picking up a checkbook. I wrote a check and slid it across the table. "What is this?" Chloe asked, wiping her eyes. "The 30,000, I said. "Technically, I lent it to you. You returned it when the audit exposed the fraud, but I want you to have it." "Bethany, I can't." "It's not a loan," I said firmly. "It's an investment. Use it for the deposit on the new apartment. Buy furniture that George never sat on. Buy art that you like. Start over." Chloe looked at the check, then at me. She stood up and pulled me into a hug, a real hug, fierce and desperate. I held her back, resting my chin on her shoulder, looking out the window at the skyline of the city I had conquered. I had been homeless, I had been mocked, I had been abandoned. But as I stood there, holding my family together, I knew one thing for certain. The woman who slept in the Honda Civic was gone, and the woman who replaced her, she was unbreakable.